Hello, people, and welcome to another Ball of a Passion episode after a triumphant 3-1 Derby win. We're happy. I think a lot of you guys will be happy. I think we're all a bit up in arms over a good Derby win, and it's always nice to get a win over those guys. But let's be real, we haven't really played any big teams yet, so it's interesting to see what we're going to do going forward. I've got George with me. We'll get into discussing all the stuff that's happened. But first and foremost, how are you feeling? I know you've had an epic weekend, let's put it that way. So are you recovered? How are you doing, buddy?
I think recovery is a very loose term, but you know what? It was made a lot better when we come back, and you know the predictions are lined up 3-1. I love me a 3-1 North London Derby win. You know, it was excellent. It was. You know, the weekend was crazy, just on a personal level. I had my best buddy that was getting married, so it was kind of insane. But in terms of just like the Arsenal, in terms of what we're looking at here, I was very excited by what we saw. I thought that we played phenomenally, and you know we're gonna have probably some debates. We were just talking off air about like some debates about some kind of tweaks that we may have seen in midfield, but I was just very impressed with the way that we went about our business. I think there was a lot of back post runs. I think there was a lot that our wingers did in particular. Like, it was very clear that Mikel had targeted the wings in terms of getting us 1v1 against their players. I think really early, you know, Aaron Ramsdale's sending long balls out to Martinelli and out to Saka as early and as quick as he can, because he knows that between those two that they're very poor defensively. So the big thing for me was, you know, you kind of saw this case where Martinelli and Saka had a numerical disadvantage, not an advantage. There was many times where there was, you know, both their third center back as well as their wing back that would double up. So, you know, Son, for example, and Perisic would double up on Saka on the right, and you know they just couldn't deal with Saka. And then the same thing with Martinelli, where you would basically find Emerson and Son, and you know Richarlison was actually quite narrow, but I think then you would probably have Romero kind of help to step up there, and it really didn't matter because these two guys were phenomenal on the day. Another one, I think Thomas Partey was man of the match. He was just unbelievable in terms of his positional astuteness, but also his firing between the lines he was receiving. And I think he's really helped by the less onus that we place on him positionally to basically cover ground. He really benefits from the fact that he's got that extra time, because then he can fire balls between the lines, and we're not as different. You know, some of the great things that I saw, particularly in this match, was Conte is so negative. He is so negative in his approach. It really is this 5-4-1 block that we're really seeing. And, you know, in theory, this idea that if you pack the center, you're going to stop Arsenal is something that a lot of coaches have felt like it's the only thing they can do, by the way. Scott Parker did this. It was a cheap knockoff version of Bournemouth Scott Parker. If you guys remember back then, we talked how Scott Parker tried to do this similar, you know, instead of a 5-4-1, he did this 5-3-2 and added somebody in attack to kind of help us. But, you know, Spurs are incredibly negative, and, you know, Kane was kind of sitting in on Thomas Partey. And then you had this midfield dynamic where they tried to leave Højbjerg and Bentancur as screeners in front of the back three, because they asked essentially Richarlison and Son to be really, really narrow inside the center to basically mark Xhaka and Odegaard, who were in these half spaces. And we'll talk a little bit more about kind of what that meant, but they were hoping essentially that Emerson and Perisic were 1v1 man marking job on the wings, which didn't work well. And then they were hoping that, you know, the back three would allow them a little bit more flexibility to have Højbjerg and Bentancur just stir things and make things really ugly. But we are happy to build wide. In fact, we thrive on building wide. And I'm really struggling to understand why teams and opposition managers aren't going to have a look at that, because we do very well to make sure that we break with great intensity, but also we can keep it there. And I think the story of this game for me was, as we were building Curran quite a bit, I noticed that both Xhaka and Odegaard, who are kind of typically our inside channels, they were dropping off, and they were causing Spurs' backline to question whether or not who would follow them. They were unsure of the assignment. So in build-up, what you really found was that Granit Xhaka and Odegaard, depending on where the ball was, would drop off into the half spaces a little bit deeper than usual. It was a small tweak. And then once we finally got into the final third and our wide players received it, they made darting runs inside as like second striker roles. And it left essentially a large amount of space both on the far side, so whether it was Saka or Martinelli, tons of space. How many times I think, Martinelli had hit the post in the first 2 minutes from this exact play that I'm talking about, where Saka delivers a deep cross, but because they don't know where they are, Martinelli is left completely open in the far post. And it's because of the running of Granit Xhaka and Odegaard. And the reason I bring this up is because in our previous games, Martin Odegaard as well as Granit Xhaka have been high for a lot. We were talking off air about how it seemed like almost like a second striker role, but one thing that I really noticed here is in our build-up, they dropped even deeper to basically cause a question whether or not it was the midfield's job or Romero to follow. And they didn't do well, whether it was Romero or Longley. They both hesitated. Can't wait to get into the screenshots, but I think that half space dropping was basically the difference for Spurs, because there is no space in the center. They basically tried to gamble that they had enough out wide to deal with the talent that we have out there, but really they just couldn't track our runners on the inside a little bit more. And Zinchenko was very clearly inside with Thomas Partey creating a double pivot in our 3-2-5 for most of the game, for me at least. And he was much more deeper in this role. I think I would have preferred a little bit more often. We were talking in the preview if Martinelli came inside a little bit more, because there was a lot of space with Romero and he wasn't tracking. And so I could see that from the preview, but we didn't quite get that. We kind of got our wingers staying a little bit wide, and we asked a lot more of our interiors. Other shout-outs, I guess, in the game that had really excellent games was William Saliba, my boy, Saliba season. He's been excellent, but this was a standout kind of landmark performance from him. We finally saw the dribbling that, I've been warning. You've just seen the tip of the iceberg with this boy, but progressively, he was phenomenal throughout the game. And of course, Ben White, which I was told we don't ask him to overlap, but his overlapping is a big reason why we found Saka inside quite a bit more in this game. And so in terms of performances, Granit Xhaka with, again, another top performance, another goal, by the way, officially his most productive season, kind of ever. He's got two three goals now. So it's like
30 shot creating actions. It's mental.
Yeah, it's insane. And, he's killing it in that interior, but it's really the same kind of culprits, really, Corinne. Like for me, Bukayo Saka had one of his best games of the season, by the way, and we'll get into it. The amount of times that boy was at a disadvantage in this game, but he still created massive amounts of opportunities. I think he was definitely our most potent, attacker for me. It was somebody that, was thriving off the game and the narrative. I think, we did leave him quite isolated at times, and he did a very good job making sure to delay the pass and give Ben White an opportunity, which we saw for the goal, but also in many half space crossing to have tons amount of time in that right half space. And it all has to do with Bukayo Saka delaying his pass, receiving, drawing 2-3 markers, and then making sure that Ben White is far open on that right-hand side to basically decide when to play the pass or not. And, we had a lot of joy in Spurs basically not being aggressive in their block to meet the markers, because if somebody was aggressive to Ben, we don't get half the opportunities that we basically received in this game. So yeah, I mean, like a ton of really good performances all across the pitch. I was just really happy that we basically showed our dominance, and we showed something new a little bit in some tweaks. So I was happy to see that. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, one thing I think you were mentioning about the build-up structure and how we exploited Spurs' rest defense. I think that's a major key, because Spurs, their rest defense relies on wide overloads. They go 4v3 out wide, and then if the central midfielder jumps, then we jump. So Bentancur and Højbjerg, so I've got it here because I wrote on Spurs. Basically, what happens is the central midfielder jumps to this cage. But what we did is we had Xhaka and Partey deep, keeping the distances small, so they can't both jump because of the space left behind. So, for example, if you look at the two central midfielders here, the deeper ones, they were close together. But what this meant is if Spurs jumped in there from their defense to attack the ball, the space in behind allows for an Ødegaard or for a Martinelli or Zinchenko for something like this. This allows for space in behind, and that's what Conte hates. He wants the two lines, his 5 and his 4, collapsed, no distances, try and isolate the space in front of you. And what we did is we made sure that Xhaka and Partey were together, but we also made sure that Ødegaard dropped and then advanced quickly. It wasn't static, and as you mentioned, the assignments weren't very clear because both would drop, the other would advance, and it wasn't clear. They didn't know when to shift. They didn't know when to overload onto which side because we kept changing it. And if you have a defense that relies on your centre midfielder jumping at the correct time, that's how they get the ball back. That's where the aggression comes in their S defense. Then if you don't have that ability to read it, then it's hard to combat, and they couldn't combat it, and that's why they kept dropping back and back and back to the point where even in the first 2 minutes it was sort of like they were already on the edge of their area in both lines. So it was clever, it was smart to make sure that we exploited the fact that even though they have the ability to stay compact centrally in terms of having those two in midfield to jump at the correct time, they had space available if you shift to either side, because their whole rep defense relies on the wide overloads to keep basically the 4v3. I mean, if you just count here, guys at home count as well. In this diagram, on both sides, there's a 4v3. There's 3 blue circles and 4 Spurs circles, 4 white ones, right? So if you can bypass that and basically shift the block to the point where, as George mentioned, at the far post or either side wide, you can't defend that because the block is shifted. There's too much space out wide on the far side. So the interesting thing for me was we disagree with this. We'll get into this at some point. I personally think that Xhaka was he dropped, but when we got through the middle third to the final third, he almost turned into that left interior, almost pseudo 10 second strike kind of role, where he was the one attacking the box, making those runs, because Jesus and Martinelli or Jesus and Saka would interchange. And that means that you needed that second runner to attack the box, to get people inside the box. I think you think that there's a more of a case where we weren't stepping up enough, and it was more of a 2-3, a more compact 2-3-5 as we usually do. But there were certain instances when the block was shifted. So when their block was shifted to one side, you could see when the interchange happened between the winger and the centre forward that Xhaka was the one making the run into the box. It wasn't as if it was a Jesus or a Martinelli. It was Xhaka the one always trying to make that run to go past the line and break their block down.
I think fundamentally what it was is the two interior channels, the two midfielders were making runs in between the wing back and the third center back. I got a message basically from one of our avid watchers, AFC Mush. I was unfortunately at a wedding getting absolutely schmacked, but he was basically like, "How, George, tell me how we beat this 3-4-1-2 that Spurs could potentially employ." And again, I always tell people on the channel here, anytime that you've got a back three, fundamentally as a coach, you're looking at what the space is between the wing back and the third center back, and to attack that. And that essentially is what we really focused on. But how we basically worked that space, because again, when you receive a 5-4-1 block, there's no space centrally. So when you do crash, I just want to put up, Curran, that one picture that you had a little bit earlier on that talked about kind of that setup that you had just put in. And it really shows kind of that block really well in terms of what you're basically going to have. And so this is a kind of in transition, this what we typically would have faced kind of in our team. And I'll just point everybody's direction kind of to this. The white are obviously Spurs, and unfortunately blue is Arsenal. But when you have it here, it really shows that they have this 3-4-1-2 kind of well. And if Harry Kane as the striker would drop a little bit deeper, you get that 1-2. But where is the space in this? And fundamentally, it's out wide when that right wing or that left wing, again, I'll get your eyes there, makes a darting run out wide and can basically find space in between that wing back and the third center back, because typically their center mids will push up quite a bit. Now, what's really good about this back three system is it essentially has a man v man press quite easily everywhere throughout the back five. So if you look at this front three that you go from the wingers across, to your striker, to your right wing, they're all covered by the three at the back. And then your two interior center mids, in theory, should mark your opposing eights. And so what the issue becomes is, how do I work the ball around to draw out, the center mids? And, this is where our debate between me and Curran kind of happens, because you could do this either through potentially as a diamond, or potentially through this 3-2-5 and 2-3-5 kind of possession setup, and that we're debating. But very firstly, before we get into it, I really want to shout out special friend on the channel who we're going to be using some of his screenshots. Please go and check him out in terms of his writing, as well as his Twitter handle at RJ Arsenal Blog on Twitter. That's at RJ Arsenal Blog on Twitter.
It's in the description.
And the link is in the description about it, but we're going to get into it because I think it's time to have this debate, Curran. So essentially, this is what, I felt that we employed quite a bit throughout the match. And, it's kind of a little bit semantics about whether it's a 3-2-5 or a 2-3-5. But fundamentally, what you've got here is Ben White, Saliba, Gabriel back. And then I think what I felt that we had was this Zinchenko-Partey double pivot was very quite evident. But when I talk about Granit Xhaka dropping, this is what I'm talking about, by the way. When we're building on the side, our interiors dropped, and basically their center backs and center mids didn't know who to cover Xhaka. And this is on the left-hand side, and then you'll notice this happens on the right as well. But immediately on the ball side, our center mid dropped, whereas on the far side, Odegaard is attacking that space, by the way, between center backs. And that is what I think was the switch that was happening. And that's what was creating space for the far side wingers, and what a lot of people felt like, was issues in terms of marking in space. This for me was very key, because typically Xhaka has actually been a lot higher in behind Richarlison in other games. We haven't seen him drop this deep, especially when we're in the final third quite high, by the way, and we're settled in possession. And I think this was an actual instruction, because, again, they recognized that Spurs aren't aggressive in their block enough. I talked about it a little bit earlier in the stream. One of Spurs' major issues was the fact that they didn't allow themselves to get tight to their markers. And, really quickly, we'll talk about the goal, but another instance, you kind of see this exactly what I'm talking about, but on the right side. When you look at Saliba now, Odegaard is a lot deeper than what we really would have felt. And then again, Xhaka on the far side is high. So I think that dichotomy where the ball side interior dropped 10 to 15 yards meant that Longley, who, again, I'll just point your direction here, he has a really weird positioning, but he doesn't know whether to stick to Odegaard or not. And that is what really caused a lot of panic, and it opened the 1v1 opportunities out wide. Again, I'll go back. You saw this on the left-hand side. I mean, I know that Jesus is wide out right now, and, Martinelli takes up a centered position, but it really doesn't matter. Fundamentally, what you have is a center mid dropping 10 to 15 yards deep, and you have center backs and center mids from Spurs' perspective that don't know who to mark because of that drop. And that only happens on the ball side. The far side center mid is attacking the box. Now, the reason that this is a change for me is that against Bournemouth, for example, against Leicester, against other teams, we had both of our interiors high and wide. That was the change for me. And it didn't matter whether or not you were ball side or not, but both center mids were high, attacking that second striker role. And so for me, this really allowed us to isolate the wings, because we recognized that there was a mismatch between Emerson as well as Perisic. And Mikel clearly had this. If you guys go back in the middle of the game, Ramsdale was instructed very early to hit Martinelli out wide, to hit Saka very early. And we saw this happen so that we could create a little bit of a superior advantage with our wide talents, and we kind of knew that. And there was a lot more times when Jesus would move out wide in order to really attack this, and so we made sure to really create maximum width, because, again, when we talk about a block here, as you guys can see, the center of the pitch is packed, right? And so what we're trying to, at least looking to do, is to create a little bit more avenues by stretching their line a bit and asking them to meet the markers. And Spurs were poor at that. They really were poor, and we'll talk about it in the goals that we scored and that they conceded. But fundamentally, they weren't aggressive in their block. Otherwise, they would have had a fairly good time in terms of defending us, by the way. One thing to kind of relate back to us that we did this really well was, does everybody remember last season when we went a man down against Liverpool, and we were forced to play, instead of a 5-4-1, it was more of a 5-3-1 block, right?
Yeah.
And we were supremely aggressive in stopping the wide channels. And this is what Spurs lacked that we took advantage of, right? Because if you had the same aggression meeting the wide channels, you would have stifled an ability to create out wide. And what they didn't do was, in allowing our center mids to drop and no one picking them up, you allowed our wide forwards, again, this is Jesus in this example, but Saka did it as well on the right, to keep the width out wide, that then allowed them to create space for the opposite center mid. And I'll point your eyes to Odegaard, who's kind of on the far right-hand side of the screen, to make that blindside run in between the two center backs. And that is what really caused panic for me all the way throughout. And they did this both sides. This was a very typical setup. And again, I'll show back on the right. This is kind of something that we did when we worked the ball out to the right. Odegaard dropping in between, Longley. I'll point everyone's direction kind of to the center of the screen there. Longley is out of position. He gets drawn in because of the movement from Odegaard, and then that leaves Perisic 1v1. That little tweak is what allowed us to really exploit the wide channels quite a bit in this game, and make sure to kind of put our best players in 1v1 opportunities when we could, as often as we could. So that's the case for me. I'll give it over to you, Kern, to kind of explain the diamond that you felt that we saw a little bit more. But this is kind of what I meant when I was talking a little bit earlier in the stream, where I felt that the ball side center mid would drop a little bit, but the far side would stay high. And I mean, even in this example, you can kind of see that Xhaka is in that 10 spot that you're talking about, right, Kern? But I think the short side center mid drops a little bit more often. But yeah, here, I'll let you go for this essentially diamond that you felt that we saw a little bit as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, everything that George just said happened. Look, okay, we're not disputing. We've always said on the channel that we build in a 2-3-5. The fullbacks come inside, and basically the five across the front, and we have the off the ball movement to try and basically take out or disrupt any block that we pursue. But we also saw, in my opinion, this basically, where in a couple of times where we had basically even it was a 3-1 at times, where especially when we were trying to force the game on a bit more, where we would actually have basically Zinchenko come inside and be that sort of extra midfielder. Sometimes he was central as well. Sometimes he was on the left. But for me, there were times when we had Ben tuck in to form the three. Zinchenko would form the left centre midfielder, and Jack would be sort of high and making those runs to the box where you have, for example, Jesus and Martinelli interchanging, but the one constant was Xhaka making those runs into the box, Xhaka being the one trying to basically disrupt the gaps in between the centre-back channel or the full-back centre-back channel at times. He was the one trying to basically make sure that you had an extra man in the box, and we had times where Zinchenko, even times he was at the base, and we would have basically Partey be a bit more advanced. But the main thing I want to point out here is just look at the space between Zinchenko and Odegaard backwards to Partey. When you give Partey that much space to conduct a final third rotation or switch the play from side to side, you're going to be in trouble. This man has technical security. He has the ability to harmonize with the movements of other attackers, and you have the ability here to have two technically secure controllers in front of him, in Zinchenko and Odegaard, who are able to either advance the ball onto the final third, take the ball, turn and get the ball off into either to the fullback or pass it back, or just recycle the play. Both of them are very technically secure. You have Partey with the ability to find either this to do the same thing but be a bit deeper and have that extra space. And then you have Xhaka more free. He's not being the one who has to basically track back. Like I know we've harped on about this goal a lot, Watford away, the second goal, where he's basically caught in transition. He's trying to run back and get back. He has Zinchenko behind him a bit more centrally inside to actually, you know what, I can just make that run and not be so afraid that I have to make sure that I'm looking behind me in case I lose the ball. I can be aggressive, get the second balls if we lose the ball, make the runs to the box that we need. So while everything George said is obviously the main theory behind how we play football, it's the main build-up structure we have, that 2-3-5, two inverted fullbacks, the wingers wide, the interiors more, the central midfielders more in those half space channels, ready for crosses or ready for to make those runs to the box, and a striker in the middle. Obviously, that's the way we usually play it. But there was a different dynamic I saw. I thought a bit more adaptability, a bit more freedom when we needed to secure a goal, basically, because this was in the first half before we had scored. I think we were a bit more aggressive because we needed to basically overload in the central areas, because essentially we had the numbers. Without Basuma there, you don't have that third midfielder in the middle to really halt them in defensive situations. You don't have that extra
I
man
think
in
what
the
you
middle.
kind of saw is they opted, as opposed to kind of an extra midfielder, they opted for their wingers to drop deep and add cover in the middle of the park, which I think was a really big issue for them, because for me, Richarlison and Son at times were quite lazy, or not lazy, but weren't aggressive in their marking jobs. And you kind of saw that in terms of, the first goal. And, it's kind of almost been 25 minutes where we talk tactics. So I want to, you guys in the comments, you let us know what you guys felt you saw in terms of how we built up. But I'm going to move on in terms of the game we got to talk about. And before we get to the goal, just really quickly, there was a couple flash moments, namely the Martinelli post hit that happened, where we kind of did this thing where we worked it out wide really well. We kind of isolated who took on Paris really, really well, made a really nice cross. And, I think people missed this, but, Granit Xhaka is pinning back their center back excellently to allow Martinelli wide. I talked a little bit about this kind of at the beginning of the stream, where we used our interior center mids to kind of occupy their wing backs or center backs kind of in the box. That left the wide far side winger completely open. And this is what you saw here, where, he hit the post. It was an excellent little kind of tidbit. But before we get to the goal, because there is a frightful moment in terms of a Spurs set piece at the 12th minute, where they do receive an excellent save from Aaron Ramsdale, by the way, who is in on goal. When you look at it, I think Zinchenko needs to do better here in terms of marking both Kane and Richarlison from a standstill. When you kind of look at it, I think that was kind of something that we struggled with. And the issue that I've got with it is, he's not aggressive enough in terms of getting ball side to his markers. And, I think this is something that we might need to have a look at, because he is a little bit at fault for me for the first Spurs goal by doing this exact same thing. He's not aggressive running back from goal. And, you kind of see this where, at least in the set piece, he isn't getting in front of Harry Kane. He isn't getting in front of, Richarlison enough. And, that is a scare. And, Aaron Ramsdale has a very strong, firm right hand to guide that out. That is a very big flashpoint in the match, because at that point we were all over them in terms of just possession territory. But that is a point that was a very difficult save to make, and Aaron Ramsdale does beautifully kind of to stop that from going in. And again, I would want Zinchenko to be a little bit more aggressive in terms of when he is from a standstill and running back to goal. Like, I really want him to do a little bit more in terms of his ability to kind of meet his markers there. And we'll talk a little bit more about kind of how that kind of plays into effect with his defensive responsibilities later for the goal. But in that 12th minute, it's not good enough for me. Like, we do need to defend that better. And Aaron Ramsdale bails us out in that 12th minute. That's probably one of the only times in the first half that I felt that Spurs got in, and it was from a set piece, ironically. But we do have to defend that a little bit better. It just comes down to aggressively tracking your markers. I mean, Harry Kane misses the ball, and Richarlison does get it through, but Zinchenko's already calling for an offside, and he's not running aggressively enough. And for me, I don't like that. It's absolving yourself of responsibility. But Curran, what did you make of kind of that early scare from Tottenham? Because I think it was against the run of play. There's no doubt about it.
It was definitely against the run of play. I mean,
but it still was a great chance.
It was a great chance, but they're running this narrative like, if they just put the ball in better into the back of the net, or made the right passes, would have won that game. Well, if we had a fit defensive midfielder for Man United, we could have won that game. Like these guys are. It's silly. I really feel like it's a really, really silly narrative that we're trying to push here. That it's somehow our fault that they're bad. It's our fault. It's we badly. Yeah, I don't know. I could go for it.
Yeah. So you just quickly tell me if you agree. I felt like I've never seen a time where rivals, but commentary in general and punditry has basically praised the idea of opportunities versus chances. And so, like, what I mean by that is, if this and this happened, then potentially it could be a goal, and that was really dangerous. Well, you guys weren't saying that last year when we had that run against Brighton Palace at the beginning of the year when we were creating dangerous opportunities but not completing the final action. Nobody was giving us the benefit of the doubt here. And
if we didn't have injuries, we'd be in the top 4. Like, we could do this all day.
If Lacazette was able to run more than 20 yards, we would have somebody in the middle of the box, and maybe we would be in the title race.
The hypotheticals are just mental. Like, I don't understand why it's somehow we're not dealing in reality. We're dealing in ifs and buts. But
actually, no. Here, I'm gonna really push back on this, because no, we couldn't say the same, because actually we got in their box. We actually had touches in their box, and we had more than one open play shot in the first half, which is something that
we
Spurs
had 15 before they got sent off. Before
Yeah.
Emerson got sent off, we had 15 shots.
Yeah, I don't understand this narrative that there was just pot shots and we were lucky that ours went in. No, we had
that was with tactically we literally trained that Partey goal.
Yeah, we've been training that Partey we've been training that Partey goal for quite a while, and we'll get into the Partey goal because I want to break it down. There was a really good play by Bukayo Saka. No, we'll get into it, but I really push back on this notion because, again, if you have 15 shots compared to somebody's, I think of our 22 shots, 15 of which came before the red card. You can't tell me that you can't tell me that 10 or 15 came after in the beginning of the second half, in between that red card. It's really refusal to understand kind of the dynamics. I think after that, Spurs basically had maybe one chance after their goal. They had a 10-minute spell where they were quite good, and we'll talk about that and what kind of stopped there. They were good in that sense, but other than that, they really didn't offer many half chances. And by the way, we had plenty of chances. Like I said, Martinelli is open in the middle of the box and hits the post in the first 2 minutes. You don't call that a chance? It's really poor by Spurs. And, I don't understand. For me, at least, when we got all of these shots, at least we had opportunities on goal. What Spurs had were opportunities in the middle of the park that they failed to create into a final action. That is the biggest difference. We've created these chances to create a final action.
They had 2 shots on target and one was a penalty.
Well, this is what I struggle with. That's why I make the distinction. Maybe it's a case of chance versus opportunity. Because, again, people seem to praise Spurs for getting into good opportunities, but they didn't create any chances. So who cares if they created a good opportunity, but it didn't result in a chance?
I've heard more about that Perisic miss. The one where he just kind of fires it off into the stands.
Yeah. Than
the actual goals we scored, which is kind of mental. But look,
yeah, I know it was a little bit ridiculous. And I'm not here to talk about narratives because it is ball over passion. But guys, I think it's time to get into the first goal because it was.
Let's get into the goals because I'm tired of talking about people that don't understand what's going on. So let's actually talk some football.
Yeah, exactly. So, here, I'm going to bring it up. And look, you guys have all seen the screenshot because I did it to make my point earlier about the center mids dropping. But again, just, we're working kind of the Spurs back line at this point. Again, after that chance to Ramsdale, this is kind of the next major chance that happens. I don't really count the Granit Xhaka shot that happened a couple moments before this. There wasn't really anything tactical there. Essentially all you've got is Thomas Partey feeding Granit Xhaka, who is unmarked and has a great shot. It is a good shot. It is maybe an omen of something to come because Granit Xhaka does excellently on his goal. But beyond that, what we basically have here is Saliba that's reworking the ball. And again, I'm just going to highlight Martin Odegaard. I want everybody to kind of focus their eyes on kind of this part of the screenshot who has dropped deep and look at Longley. Look at Son, who is doing okay to kind of block the entry pass into Martin Odegaard. That's actually a time when Son was doing well. And this is what I talked about when they basically relied on their wingers to be super, super narrow. And they formed this kind of blocking of the center. But because Odegaard dropped so high, Longley, which is the third center back at that area, is unsure whether he needs to stick or twist. And ironically, if Longley did stay in his position, it would have been a lot better for him. But, he decides that it's dangerous to leave Martin Odegaard in that kind of space. And Saliba whips out the ball out to Saka, who is against Perisic. And now at this point, it's, a qualitative advantage, we call it, which is just essentially that Saka is a better player than Perisic 1v1. And we're basically trying to work this up. And then once that pass makes it over to Saka, Spurs do really well to kind of crash in the middle of the box. And so, but one thing that, again, I want to highlight is look at both Odegaard and Xhaka in this point in time. And they're both pinning the center back, but as well as the wide wing back. And look at Jesus, far side open. This happened so many times. I talked about how it happened with Martinelli in the first 2 minutes. It happened here with Jesus on the goal. But the one thing that, Bukayo Saka does here, he drags, Son and Perisic in, and now it's a 2v1. And what he does is he delays his pass, which is phenomenal to White, by the way. And it works the space because look here, there is a massive gap where Partey is going to run into. You don't even see Partey at this point in the screenshot, but it's because of Odegaard driving and making that unselfish run that both Højbjerg and Longley need to stay back to block off that lane. Because once it goes to White, they're concerned about the slipped through ball in the middle of the box, right? Now, one thing that's really poor by Spurs, and we talked about this earlier in the stream, and how they weren't aggressive in their box, is, guys, everyone have a look at Højbjerg right now. He's in a very good position, but what he should do is meet the markers very aggressively. He doesn't. He's quite lazy, and he's jogging out to Thomas Partey. And, that is really where Spurs kind of lacked. Their center mids weren't aggressive in terms of meeting the top of the box, and everybody else is a mark. And so it left them basically with massive amounts of space at both the top of the box, but out wide as well. And so this is also just a wonder goal by Thomas Partey. It took us how many shots for him, basically. But this is a training ground and an exercise. And what I really, really loved was, not only was Bukayo Saka delaying the pass, but so was Ben White. And so when you look at it, Ben White is in this dangerous half space area when he does receive it. And, he waits for Thomas Partey to kind of essentially have that space at the top of the box to release. And, that little extra second is, again, really, really important. And, you have us. Spurs are basically got 5 or 6 players in the box when you do count at this point, and we've only got 4. But what we're doing really well is we're making sure that we're pinning in their wide center backs as well as their wide wing backs to leave some space both at the top of the box but also out wide for us. So that is really kind of the crucial part of this goal. And again, Højbjerg specifically, isn't aggressive enough to meet his marker, and that's what gives Thomas Partey the space. But again, I will say, Current, he has a lot to do here because that is it's a world-class shot. It is. And it's been a long time coming, but the technique to do that and to smash a top corner is phenomenal. And he does his job. But what did you make of kind of that first goal? Because I feel it's been a while. It's been a while coming, and this has happened quite a bit. But I think he does well to get his body over the ball, and he controls it really well. And it's just a wonderfully shaped R2. So, what do you make of it?
Before we move on, I just want to quickly put that back up because I just want to point out Son here because what we've done so well in this game specifically was Ben White on Son because Son. He knows that throughout this game, Ben White has the ability to go past and he has to track the run going past Saka and pushing on the overlap. But he also has the ability to stay back and be basically lurking in the half space, waiting for opportunity to pounce. So he goes both ways. And Son here, he tries to double up on Saka and realizes that, oh crap, I've left White in tons of space. I've got to move back. And I think the main thing for me was, now this is not just for this goal, for the whole game, White's ability to go both ways in terms of staying inside as well as going on the outside and being able to make sure that block is collapsed even further because Son doesn't know whether to stay and double up or basically run past his centre back and go and basically it's not centre, his fullback in Perisic and basically having to mark White as he goes on the overlap. So that is so key to setting up that goal, having that insecurity in the defender's mind, whether to go to ball or whether to just hold back and go to the man you're meant to be marking. So as you mentioned, pinning back the wide centre backs is so crucial. So Longley here with Odegaard and throughout that line that they were there, and obviously Jesus had the space out wide on the back post. But I just wanted to mention because we didn't just collapse their line in terms of pushing them back. We also collapsed their wingers, which, as we mentioned earlier in the stream, the whole point was the wingers stay narrow and basically control that central area. We also pushed their central basically the wingers that were meant to stay central, we pushed them back almost into their fullbacks. So that gave up spaces in the half space to really exploit and really go, okay, we can either produce a half space cross, we can push a layoff, or we can even shoot. So creating space in front of that block is what helped us in this game a lot.
And I think just us understanding when to go and when to move. Like Ben, we talked about it in All or Nothing. Like, he's been phenomenal in adapting himself to this new role. And look, I'm going to be a narcissist and pat myself on the back. You heard it here on BoP. I said it years ago. I said it when he signed, and I said it even beforehand.
We did.
Ben White.
We did. Let's get this straight.
I've been really insistent on Ben White for forever in terms of him being, that inverted right back. And, you're seeing the exact instance now. And, I think the biggest thing for me is, their defense was essentially, let us plug the center and let's hope that they can't break us down because we're going to plug holes. And, but the thing was, again, Spurs weren't aggressive in their block. So it doesn't matter if you add bodies. If you're not going to be aggressive meeting your markers, there's going to be space, particularly on the far side if you're not covering in your marker well, but also inside if you're not covering or meeting your markers quick in the middle like Højbjerg wasn't, then that really is it's really poor by them, I'll be honest with you, because when you do have this position here, yes, Son should come in and, you ask Son to kind of do a lot here, you do. But if you look at Højbjerg, he really is in a great position to kind of stop Thomas Partey, but he's very lazy in terms of meeting it out, and it gives Thomas Partey that extra little bit of time to get his shot off, shape it, and do it well. But, hey, look, their loss is our gain, and I think if they had done that a little bit better, it would have been excellent. And so for me, that was really a big key part of our plan, though, is how we worked out wide and how Saka and Ben White have been phenomenal, by the way. If you guys actually go back, I had a really nice quick thread that talked about what are some of the changes that we saw in this season on my profile. And kind of one thing that I noticed that was really, really interesting was that Bukayo Saka and Ben White is our most dangerous passing combination so far this season. So when you kind of have a look at it in terms of who creates the most expected threat, which is just a little statistic that shows in terms of what is the value added by passes in terms of creating a goal. And, Ben White to Bukayo Saka is our most consistent threat in terms of creating something from nothing. And, it's because Ben White is understanding when to kind of deliver a quick half space cross, whether it's time to overlap, and he's getting those rotations right and he's getting them down. And now, unfortunately, guys, we do have to get in probably to the worst part of the game from an Arsenal perspective, and that is the Spurs goal in terms of trying to analyze this, and also that little 10-minute kind of period. But I'll walk everybody through this goal. And look, this is why I'm kind of harsh. People may think it's harsh on Zinchenko, but again, I talked about it earlier. He was very slow in that Ramsdale chance in terms of covering between both Kane and Richarlison. But then this is even worse. So I'm going to talk about everybody. We start to kind of build through the back. We lose the ball in the middle of the park, and Zinchenko is kind of here at this point. And look at Richarlison and Son. Now, this is a very bad situation. I think that Zinchenko needs to be super aggressive. I don't mind him being high, but, you can't leave this much space in your back line, particularly if you understand that both Xhaka are up, but you understand that, Thomas Partey has maybe lost his ability to stop the counter. And when you look at it, we're very, very lucky that, Son isn't able to complete his final action because Richarlison is off into space, and this is an excellent opportunity for Spurs. And, it really comes down to Zinchenko not being in the right position, because if he is, it's an easy marking on Richarlison. So for me, it was really, really poor. And then you kind of go back, we're in the middle of the park, and Xhaka does a poor miscontrol here after, there's a little bit of good defending from Gabriel to stop Richarlison from basically entering into the box. But again, I'm looking at Zinchenko here, and he's so deep next to Aaron Ramsdale, not marking anybody. And it's very frustrating because for me, Granit Xhaka shouldn't even be in this position to receive. Once again, it has to be Zinchenko there or our left back. And so when you look at it, Ben White does absolutely get a little bit of a touch, and that is great. But we shouldn't be in this position. For me, Tony, it's an excellent job to get a block in at this point. But fundamentally, what we need is our left back to be in position there. He can't be high up the pitch where he's not there. And then after, it is kind of a catalog of errors, but really for me here, we have a miscontrol. Zinchenko is out of position. It's poor. But again, it forces Xhaka, who is on the wrong side of his marker, because again, he's coming as a central midfielder. If our left back was kind of in position there, he's able to meet the marker goal side. And, Granit Xhaka is not goal side. He's coming back, and so he doesn't want to foul. And so there's an arm out there, but he knows. And I think, look, Gabriel does poor in terms of going to ground. I think in this situation, you have to stand on your feet, and, he deserves criticism, Gabriel. But, he's in a good position. He's making up for the fact that, our left back is out of position here. And I think what's super frustrating is Zinchenko is even slow to meet Harry Kane as well. It's Saliba who actually gets there. And so I just felt that Zinchenko was released in responsibility quite a bit here, and he needs to do better in these situations. And Gabriel himself, he needs to do a lot better in terms of not going to ground in the middle of the box. Like, that's kind of inexcusable for me. And so I think that he definitely needs to have, a conversation or talking to that when you're in the middle of the box, just stay on your feet here. Saliba is excellent at controlled aggression in the middle of the box at this point, and Gabriel needs to do the same. I think what's really, really frustrating is, I agree with Yo-Yo, there's so few Spurs players in the middle of the box here, and there's a lot of, we have numbers, we have a good shape, but yet we can see from this situation. But, I think a lot of people will place blame on Gabriel, but really I'm going to place quite a bit of blame on Zinchenko, who it starts from the beginning. It starts from the beginning at this point in time where we're looking at somebody to track back. This is the catalog of error. When you're looking at it on the right side, Son is going to the right. We have numbers, guys, there. The issue is Richarlison in space. Like, when you're when you're a scout and you're trying to look at why did these errors occur, we can't have our left back that, is so high up the pitch but isn't aggressive running back to get back into position here. And if, by the way, we do this against Liverpool, you're going to be in trouble because they have a lot more quality in transitions and in the final third. I guarantee you Jota is able to get that, and we'll fire that off to Mohamed Salah. And so this, for me, is what I'm super scared of in our next game, but we're going to get into the preview too much there and why Kieran Tierney needs to start. I think I saw a comment about that a little bit higher up in terms of whether or not, Kieran Tierney, does he need to start for Liverpool? But yes, absolutely. Like, this is a situation that we're going to see quite a bit against Liverpool. So we need to make sure that we're, having players that are able to do this. So for me, it was a catalog of errors. I think most people will point to Gabriel as the fundamental one who bit the penalty. But for me, I think Zinchenko doesn't cover himself in glory here, both at the start, but also at the end. He's hanging out with Ramsdale, avoiding responsibility, not picking up a marker, and not helping to step out. Because for me, that's deep. And you know what that does, Curran? When you stand next to Ramsdale, by the way, you're putting Harry Kane onside. For me, it's very frustrating because your defensive instincts are getting you in, but you're opening the lineup so much. And, that's not correct. You need to step out and be aggressive so that you can put these players offside, but also get yourself in position. You're out of position. Don't make it worse by opening up the pitch. I'm going to go to you. Like, what did you make of the goal? But then the 10-minute spell afterwards where Spurs did have, a good, healthy amount of possession. It was probably their only redeemable part of the match, fundamentally. But what did you make of that?
I think it's being a bit overstated, to be honest. I think you rewatched, didn't you? Yep. I rewatched as well. I've rewatched it twice now, especially that 10 minutes. And I think in the moment, a lot of people are saying that we got dominated in that 10 minutes. We really didn't. They had a couple of good transitions. I think they had 3 chances in that entire period, and these weren't even chances. There was one Perisic miss. Can't speak. That Perisic miss. There we go. Richarlison pass to no one.
The Perisic miss is phenomenal because we have Ben White that's marking 1v1. We have numbers. It's excellent. And, look, I mean, Perisic is dangerous, both foot in the box, but, do excellent as a defense. He's wide.
The main thing is,
and Ramsdale has his near post too, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, the other thing is there was a Richarlison pass to no one, and then there was one more Kane counter, and I think that was it. It resulted in shots on target. I mean, I think that we're really grasping at straws to say it's some sort of domination. Like, I've seen a lot of the Jamie O'Hara's of the world, or the Spurs verse, as it were, go, oh, we had him going to halftime. It was 1-1. The penalty went in. They were all over the place. No, you had a couple of counters, but we still had the control, we still had possession, but your game plan was working a bit better. You got back into the game. You weren't dominating the game. You weren't controlling the counter. You didn't have the composure for these amazing XG overachievers that you have. They didn't have the composure to put it away in front of goal. That's on you. That's not on us. And that doesn't mean that you had the better portion of the game. It means that you had a couple of opportunities. You didn't take them. You didn't. Not only did you not take them, you didn't even get into positions where you got a shot on target. So it's a bit disingenuous, I feel.
The irony of it all, Curran, is, fundamentally, when you actually have a look at it, after that point, it's really frustrating that Harry Kane, he then seals the penalty. I mean, there's not much to talk about there. That guy always scores in North London derbies. In fact, he became, with that goal, unfortunately, the top scorer in the North London derby over Thierry Henry, even, in fact, with 44 goals over his 43, which is just horrible for narrative, but it is what it is. And, at the end of that...
No. In London derbies, not
in London derbies. Sorry, excuse me. Not in derbies in general, but, in London derbies. But even then, that's an impressive stat. And, he does come in and, he basically gets that record. It's the only thing that he's going to have a claim to fame to, because he can't win a trophy. But anyways, when you have a look at it, people talk about that 10-minute spell, Curran, but, then Jesus almost scores a wonder goal right before the half.
One of these days, that's one of those is going to go in. One of those is going to go in. I'm telling you.
And I don't know if anybody noticed, but again, Jesus once again is peeling out wide left. I talked a bit about this when he signed, and a lot of people called me, an idiot. But look, Gabriel Jesus is somebody that wants to peel into wide areas, and he does his best work in wide areas when you're building up the ball. And so when you have a look at it, okay. What he does here is just absolutely world-class play. He receives from Zinchenko, kind of ball out wide. And what he does at this point in terms of the fake shots, the pullback, and then the little toe poke at the end, you're just so unlucky not to have that toe poke go a little bit wide. I mean, I don't know if he really does anything wrong in that instance. I think maybe he delays a little bit of the ball, like it gets away from him. But, I mean, it's a world-class piece of play at that point. And, again, he does it from starting wide. It wasn't from a central position. It's, again, starting wide, dribbling in, that fake shot to pull kind of the defenders in, and it was just world-class play. And
I'm just going to say this. I was on record saying this before the season. I feel that we play with two strikers. I don't feel like it's a one-striker system. I don't really believe that at all. I feel like it's a two-striker system where we have two strikers going from one that's on the interchange between left wing and striker. And the interchange means that sometimes they're both in the box in terms of Martinelli and Jesus, and sometimes one is wide and sometimes the other is wide. But we don't have a system where it's sort of like, okay, the 9 is going to stay in the box and he's going to do the 9 work, and the winger will stay wide and he'll do the winger work. There's so much interchange, especially between those two, sometimes with Bukayo as well, but mainly between those two. And the amount of times we see Gabby in that sort of like on the left side of the box, just outside the 6-yard box, and it's just sort of, it's basically sort of going where there's some sort of there's it's almost like structured chaos. There's the ability just to interchange between the two players. They know that they can rely on the other to go wide or to come central. And we're seeing Gabby in striker positions, and I know people don't like it, but he is also a striker in the system. He's not just a winger, and the same with Jesus as well. There's just as much a winger as a striker. So
yeah, I mean, I hate this idea that people are so rigid on positions. When you talk about positional play, it's literally about freedoms and rotations. It's completely, it's ridiculous. But again, I think I got to get into it because right before the half, again, there's like a really quick chance after this, wonder run by Gabriel Jesus, in which, Zinchenko sends a dangerous ball in, and, Spurs just get I think it's Dyer that just gets a little knock, and it bounces off Saka in kind of a very promising position once again in the box. And that kind of just does it to kind of close out the half. And now it's 1-1 at this point. And this is when, I guess, Tezzy was talking about it earlier, how he was nervous. But guys, I hope that we've shown really they had two chances, and that was fundamentally their goal, but also the Ramsdale chance at the 12-minute mark. Like, that is a very good chance, for me. And those were the only chances, whereas we ourselves had both a post hit, but we also had multiple opportunities in terms of our goal, but also the half chances in terms of Bukayo Saka, Martinelli, Gabriel Jesus on the inside. Like, this is where I don't understand the narrative that, they had a little bit more chances.
I mean,
in the first half.
the perfect example is Bukayo cutting in and just missing the target just before the goal hits. Like there was a lot of chances like that where it's sort of just like just a pot shot, but it's a good opportunity. It's not like we're shooting from 50. We're shooting from just outside or inside the box, where it's just sort of like, okay, we're going to try and attack the goal. We're not going to try and walk it in. We're going to try and be aggressive and make sure we work Lloris. And when we work Lloris, we'll get into the second goal. He made a mistake, and this is remember someone who's up for the Yashin Award, for God's sake. So this is a prime goalkeeper.
Yeah, Lloris has been awful kind of all match. And there's a lot of times that under pressure, he just kicked the ball out of bounds and gave us opportunity to get possession back again, which is just ridiculous. But look, I think it's time to get into the goal because it's an excellent goal. And guess what? For me, I'll walk everybody through as we talk about it. But guys, this is all on Thomas Partey, by the way. So when he receives in this position, one thing I will say, this is one of the few times that we left Thomas Partey a little bit isolated. And Spurs are actually doing a really good job in terms of blocking the entry pass inside. Now, most people will want the ball to go to Martin Odegaard. And this would be actually poor planning by us if we did get into Martin Odegaard because he's marked by 4 people there. There's really not much support. He only has really Gabriel Jesus here. And what most midfielders would do is play it into Martin Odegaard, but not Thomas Partey. Thomas Partey delays the pass, and he looks at it and he understands that, Bukayo Saka, we need to get a superiority down there. We need to get him against Perisic. So what happens is Odegaard makes a darting run inside once again, and then Thomas Partey opens the ball up to kind of shape it out to Saka. And then at this point in time, again, Perisic isn't quick enough to kind of meet out this pass. But, Saka's, again, 1v1 versus Perisic, and we know what happens here. But Ben White, he makes another lung-bursting run. And again, I was told that we won't overlap. I was told that we don't do this. But, the really quick adjustments, again, we're going to talk about it right now, is, Ben White overlapping a little bit more. And I've talked about it on the timeline in this podcast for so long. When you have another option that is willing to go in and out on both sides, you allow Bukayo Saka to get inside. Okay, Bukayo Saka and actually, ironically, Mohamed Salah, our next winger that we're going to face, are facing the same problem of last year where they're too touchline too often. And what this does is it basically pushes Bukayo Saka inside, and that's where he's more dangerous. Bukayo Saka is more dangerous when he is closer to goal and he's in central areas. And so Ben White does this phenomenally. And so, Partey delays his pass. He receives it out to Saka. And then at this point in time, White makes probably, I don't know, what is that, current 40 yards up, in terms of where he starts, and he makes an excellent lung-bursting run. Again, Son is diligent, like he does get back. I think Son got unfairly criticized in the match. He was diligent in trying to happen, but fundamentally, this is just us using that space.
This is what I was talking about, though. This is what I was talking about, though, with basically Ben White creating that uncertainty. Because Son doesn't know whether to follow White's run or follow Saka and create that 2v1 and try and crowd him out. So Ben White makes that run, pulls a defender with him, and creates the space for Kayo. And he cuts in and he hits the target. Lloris does Lloris things, and it goes in the back of the net. So
I was talking about this kind of on Twitter, where White's increased overlapping. It's what makes the right hand side a little bit more fluid. It gets Saka inside the rotation.
Like you remember the beginning of the season, we were talking about how the right hand side was being a bit static and we wasn't getting going, etc. And now I was told that we overlap. So
I was told that we don't overlap and that's the reason that the right hand side is so static. But again, this is really what speeds up play, right, guys? Like when you add another option out wide, it allows Bukayo Saka to kind of open up. Are you going to have the slip disguise ball down the line, or are you going to stop him on his shot on the inside? Whereas if White does not make that run, all Bukayo Saka could do is cut in, right? And when you do have a chance like this, Bukayo does excellent in terms of his ball striking here, which again, he doesn't get the credit for, but he is a good ball striker. And this is a very venomous shot, by the way. You can credit the goal with Jesus in terms of him being just a classic poacher, but Lloris does not cover himself well here at all. It goes in between his legs. And look, Jesus is well to be alive to the danger and the danger ball, but this is all on Bukayo doing a really hard drill shot that's well on target, and then Jesus not giving up in terms of loose ball, which is excellent. And so I'm going to go to Kern really lastly because we do got to get through one or two more things. But what did you make of the goal, but also Bukayo Saka in general? Because I felt that this was kind of a loose assist that kind of capped off.
It's not counted. No. I don't think that ought to count it either. So I wouldn't call it an assist, but it just it just goes to show. I mentioned before about Granit having 30 shot creating actions. Bukayo has 32, Jesus has 31, and Granit Xhaka has 30, and we have Gabriel Martinelli with 34. We have a front line, a front five that are not only creating and scoring, they're creating shots for each other as well. They're creating opportunities for each other and chances to get past. And we're not just creating opportunities, but chances, people. So I think we often said that Bukayo has a slow start. I think he needs to improve on that. I think a couple of seasons, obviously last season was with the Euros. This season, I think he was a bit fatigued and he didn't get into it. Obviously, he had the Palace game where he was good, kind of went off the boil, but then obviously he's roared back and he's proven everyone why he's one of the best two right wingers in this league. There's no one better than him right now. I feel like,
you know what it is, like, though, Kern, mate. Like, I've made this distinction. I don't know if people talk about it. So, like, in terms of who are the people, I think most people that would talk on Twitter would describe that Bukayo Saka has an inconsistent finishing, and he has poor composure when it's 1v1 with the keeper. And they're
it's not even that intelligent, man. It's not even that intelligent. It's just that where's the GA brother? Like, that's the conversation. So
a little bit, but
you're giving Twitter too much credit. You're giving Twitter way too much credit. Twitter is where's the GA brother.
No, there's
there's the memes and that. It's not that sophisticated.
There is that, but I think, like, with Bukayo Saka, what is fair is I think that, you know, his finishing from the right hand side isn't as potent as it is from the left hand side. I think when you do compare between the two,
because he gets that whip. A lot more. He gets the whip on his left foot.
There's whip, but there's also his consistency in his ball swing is clean, just because he grew up on the left. Like, you know, he grew up as a left winger. You know, he did grow up that way. So for me, he lashes things. I think back to the Newcastle goal of last season that just lashed across the face of goal. Ironically, he got an injury after that. But, like, you know, his finishing is astute, it's clinical, and it's not second guessed. And then when you go on the right now, I think the biggest difference is that Bukayo Saka struggles right now on the run to get the same consistency in his ball striking. And when you notice at this point over here, he's not on the run, but he's almost from a standstill in terms of how he receives. You know, Ben White makes the overlapping run. He shifts it onto his left, and bang, you get a venomous shot. He struggles when he's on the run and he's running onto a ball from a through ball or whatnot to generate that power and consistency in his ball striking. And I think it's purely a kind of comfortability thing from being on the right-hand side. But that is something I encourage everybody to watch back, because when you look at Bukayo Saka's 1v1s that he does miss on the right-hand side, most of them are through balls or on the run. When he has time to switch and shift, he's deadly, whether it's on the right or on the left. I think he's still just struggling.
It's the burst. It's the way he goes from a standing position to foot to top speed. He has that ability. It's not like he's some sort of Brazilian favela master. He has that ability to go, okay, I'm just gonna run past you. It's that simple. Like, it's not even a question of okay, I'm gonna try and deceive you or anything. I'm just gonna run past you. You're not gonna stop me. And there was that time, I don't know if you remember, there was a run he made from literally from the right all across the pitch to the left. And laid it off. Like, I'm just thinking, like, if I'm Conte, I'm thinking, someone tackle him. Why is no one tackling him? There's no, you just can't do it. No,
100%. And he was phenomenal. And again, O'Malley, like, mate, he does this right after this point in time, by the way. So once we get the goal, immediately afterward, Ben White makes another long bursting run opposite. And, you know, it's so close. It's another exact kind of mechanism that we saw for the goal. And Ben White stands up a really beautiful cross in the middle of the box. And, you know, Emerson Royale does a horrible job defending that. But, you know, Gabriel Jesus has a free header. I'll be honest, mate, he has to do better. You know, I don't.
He does have to do better.
You know, he does have to do better. But you know,
but he finds the space and he gets the leap. Like, from that position, at least get on target, work the keeper.
Well, you got to praise the movement, because Gabriel Jesus' movement is what gets him the chance at the beginning. But this,
we're not Darwin Nunez, brother. We need to get that on the. We can't just praise guys for their movement. He needs to get that on target.
He does.
We're not Team Ghana, okay? This is not our game. We need to make sure that these guys get the ball in the back of the net. Okay, I don't want to hear great movement strikers. That's not what we do here. We're Arsenal Football Club. We're not Chelsea.
But this is why when I talk about, you know, a lot of people, I have a lot of debates on Twitter in terms of of Tomiyasu versus
I know.
Ben White. And, again, I understand, but when we talk about Ben White being a lot better in the final third, it's caked in the stats, but also it's caked in this entire performance. By the way, Ben White had such a stupidly good game, guys, between the half space cross,
There's
what he's offered, the overlap, the low driven cross. Sorry, 1 second, Jordan. Between the stand up cross, his crossing variety, Ben White's crossing variety is extremely underrated. And he's still learning the technique. When he passes it off to Partey, there was a couple times he just floated a ball in that half space. Is a teasing cross in between the center backs. And, it's somebody that has an incredible straight line running power, by the way. He has incredible agility. He eats up almost 40 yards in this area of the pitch. And, it's simple. It's really easy to do, but credit needs to go to this boy because I think he doesn't get the credit he deserves for his final third play and what his potential could be in that position because people kept telling me that he wasn't, a right back because, he maybe didn't have the crossing variety. I said hogwash. I don't think you watched him at Brighton where he did this almost 10 times in the right wing back position.
Our most dependable ball last season was White centre back to Martinelli.
Yeah.
Again and again, again and again, and again and again. So what I was going to say is if you have the Athletic, or even if you don't, find a way to get it. There's an article by Michael Cox on Ben White's game, and it's a brilliant read. He had a very good game. There's a couple of players that had very good games for me. Xhaka, Partey, him, Saliba, all had very good games. But for me, I just think that if you talk about White and you talk about what he brings more than just, he's a transition control defender. He's someone that can overlap. He's more than that. He has the ability to come inside and control second balls. He has the ability to be a bit more mean. I don't know if you've seen. I mean, we all see.
He's a master of the dark arts in terms of the team. He leads
I don't know. I'm sure you've seen the clip of Kane just sort of bouncing off him in the penalty box, and Spurs fans crying, "Why isn't it a penalty? Your own players didn't go up. Why are you going up?" But anyway, the point is, and I think we should get on to a bad exponent of the dark arts in Emerson Royale, who had a really, really, really bad performance today. Not today, on Saturday, and
he had a
really screwed up.
But here, look, I don't even know if there's much tactical analysis to go here, current mate. Like, I mean, guys, this is a red card. Like, I don't know why there's a debate. Like, people, when you're talking about having a reckless challenge, you can't be putting studs up, okay, higher than your ankle. That is a red card. I'm sorry. I don't really know what the debate is and why people are calling it a yellow or because it has to be different. This is clearly a red card for me. So just really quickly, you guys in the comments, you guys let us know if you think there's anything different. Like, Kern, I'll give you a chance to see it, but like no matter what angle you do, you start here, it gets up here in terms of where he goes into. Like, it's just a clear red card for me. Like, am I struggling here? Because there was debate on the timeline, and I see no reason for debate. Whether you look at Oba, Eddie and Kedia against Chelsea, when we receive studs up higher than the ankle, it is a red card. I don't know why there's a debate. It's reckless. It could seriously injure somebody. Do we need to see bone sticking out? Like, I don't get it. Like, help me out here really quickly, because then we can move to the goal.
I really struggle with this because I see a lot of like deflection. I feel like from rivals, from other fans, from even some of our own fans. What about Lokonga against United? Well, first of all, Lokonga versus United was nowhere near as bad as this. It just wasn't. Like it was on the. If I'm not mistaken, it was on the ankle, if not below, and he caught him, and it goes past him. This is legit studs up. This is studs up. The minute you go studs up, that's it. It's over.
No, it was a cop out. It was a classic Mustafi, like when Mustafi used to go to ground and try to, essentially piss me off as much as he could. Like, it was definitely a cop out move, and he was having a torrid time. But
the worst thing is Conte, who goes, I don't talk about referee decisions.
But if you go back, mate, if you go back to like the actual bench cam and stuff, like he's cursing it out. But then in the press conference, he's like, "Oh man, I can't believe."
Because that's who he is. That's who he is. He produces content. Let's put it that way. He's someone who likes to wind people up and try and get under people's skin. And if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. But we prefer to win football matches here. So at the end of the day, look, it's a red card. I don't really know why we're having a debate here. It's just like the shots debate. Well, sorry.
Yeah,
If you
no,
got a shot on the target, we would have had a discussion about it. But you had one, and we had a discussion about it in Richarlison, and we discussed the penalty. That was it.
yeah,
So
look, I don't
we even
understand
no.
why.
Let me just say this. We even discussed a miss that went off target. That's how scarce it was. That's how scarce it was in terms of like the shots they had. They were inept. They were impotent, and they were shite. And they're shite today as well. They played against Frankfurt today, 0-0 draw against a team that is struggling in the Bundesliga. So cry. I don't really know what to say. Like, what do you want me to do? Like, this is not a this is not a debate here. So they weren't really good. They weren't good, and the third goal shows it even more because at the minute that happens, and this whole another thing it said that annoys me is apparently the narrative is, oh, they didn't go, they didn't set up in time they didn't recover from the red card. Brother, there was a good 5-10 minutes between the red card and the and the goal. It wasn't like it was like the same play. It wasn't even the
No,
same.
and you know what? Ultimately, after that, I think I'm going to move on kind of to the goal because we're
Yeah.
almost running out of time, so we should talk about that. But guys, again, I'm going to walk everyone through the goal really quickly because it was a phenomenal goal, and guess who's at the center of it? It's Thomas Partey again. Again, I think he had a very underrated game where people, especially on the rewatch, the amount of times that he kept people in the half, he was positionally so astute and stopped so many counters. But again, with his ability in the ball here, he delays the pass because he recognizes that Martinelli has a 1v1, and a lot of people kind of criticize him for being too vertical, but Thomas Partey here displayed a lot of pausa both in the goal from previously in terms of his play out to Saka, but even here in terms of Martinelli. But if he was to give it to him early, Martinelli has an awful lot to do. But he delays his pass and basically lets Martinelli receive on the inside. And that for me is the biggest change that you're going to see, because if he receives it 2-touch line, he doesn't get the space right now. And Martinelli is in on goal. And when you've got Dyer, and I forget who is in the back there, but I think, did they replace him with Doherty at that point?
No,
Martinelli
subs went after the third goal.
After this one, right? So
yeah.
Martinelli is bearing down on goal.
It's Longley.
It's Longley. And at this point, Martinelli just draws in a lot of Spurs players, and then Granit Xhaka takes over. I think at this point, Xhaka's finish is excellent. He's got great ball striking. People I don't know why people are so surprised to see this, but he's got so much potential in terms of output production, because he's somebody that has a very consistent ball striking pattern, and he does really well. Again, earlier into the first half, he gave everybody a shot that he was going to score, by the way. Do you remember that? I think it was in the 16th minute where he's just bursting through and he takes a shot outside the box, and it's really close, far post. And from that moment on, I just knew that, he was going to get a goal. And this is just excellent finishing by Granit Xhaka at the end of the day. I don't think there's too much tactical in terms of what we do. The only big thing is, I will say, Thomas Partey from receiving at this point in the pitch, waiting to delay his pass to basically give it to Martinelli when he's on the inside. And that's without really a major overlap, by the way. That was all Thomas Partey in terms of when he releases the pass. And that, for me, is the key that makes this goal. So big benefit there. And then at the end of the day, we get 3-1. George is right on the predictions once again. He returns his place at the top of the throne of the predictions. And again, we get another 3-1 North London Derby win. And, again, I'm just sitting here smiling because, when you look at it, this is a game that everybody can be really happy. I think when you look at it, Thomas Partey, Ben White, Granit Xhaka, William Saliba, Bukayo Saka were all top performers in this match. And, you can't really go wrong in terms of selecting somebody for a man of the match. I think it has to be one of those five. I will be insistent on that. But for me, this is one of the better games that I've seen from Thomas Partey, which gets me really excited, because I feel that if we're going to do anything this season that's special, and I'm talking special for people, he has to be at the heart of it, and he has to be playing 90% of the games, because it wasn't just the goal. Thomas Partey, for me, was delaying his pass and making really smart decisions about when to release the ball, and it was those extra little bits of pausing our game. We're now slowly getting to the point, Karan, for me, that the rotations that we're seeing in the final third, they're no longer being rushed. We're now controlling when we want to speed play and when we want to lose it. And that is when Man City are so dangerous, by the way, and how they move opposition's teams. It's not just the fact that, they've got excellent numbers. They do these wide overloads that are beautiful. It's not like the positional play is the only reason they create this. They recognize when to speed up play and when to slow things down. And I think we're becoming a lot more smart. And when we're not thinking about when to do it. Bukayo Saka, for example, was against Son and Perisic how many times? And he delays his pass, and it's what creates the Partey goal. It's what gives the space for Ben White to deliver a dangerous half-space cross. We look at Thomas Partey here, the second goal. He delays the pass into Martin Odegaard and finds Bukayo Saka, and he recognizes that is the mismatch. And we're not rushing our decisions in the final third. We're being very clinical, very patient in terms of who and when we decide to speed play up, and whether that's through the center or wide. And that's what got me super excited. So we finally, I don't know if you can call it that we've really beaten a big team yet, but, this is a big narrative win for the boys. I think it was excellent in terms of pre-Liverpool to get something like this. And, we'll talk about that preview a little bit later. But
yeah,
I think Thomas Partey is
I'm so excited for this. Yeah. I'm so excited to get into that preview, which will be tomorrow, by the way. Just to really say that, because we are really going to have some interesting takes on teams. I think we're going to see an interesting take for Tomiyasu. We're going to have a conversation about that. But in terms of this game, I really, really feel like this is the most I actually enjoyed watching us play in a long time. Like, I watched that game 3 times and I wasn't bored 1 minute. Like, I could watch it again now. Like, it was so much fun to watch. It was so much fun to watch these cowards retreat into their box time and time again and try and keep up. So,
you know what the most satisfying thing was, Curran? Was Conte admitting defeat by the subs and how early in the game he did it. Like, that is just so embarrassing. And it's beautiful. I mean, I love the fact that, we were able to do this against them. I was never really in doubt of it. They've won once in the last 29 times that they've been to the Emirates. So, like, I think, it was something that we all kind of expected, but I think the way that we're playing recently has been just phenomenal. And it's been excellent. So I'm really happy that we've beaten their run. One thing that I'll definitely point back out to everybody, just as a quick reminder, is, we're back up on the previews and 3-1. So I'm gonna take that narcissism point and establish ourselves.
Harry Kane, I hate you.
We're gonna establish ourselves firmly at the top, where we belong. But Curran, any last minute thoughts for yourself?
Spurs are shit, mate. I mean, that's kind of the biggest takeaway. No, in all seriousness, look, I made the tweet earlier about where could this team go, because a lot of talk about title challenges or for top 4 or where are we going to go? What can we do with this team? I don't know. I don't think any of us know. I think we could go into a top 4 race. We could be in a title race. I think we need to look at where we are in January, assess where we are. We've got a couple of big games coming up. Liverpool. I think Leeds isn't an easy game. Southampton, we can do what we can, and then we get out of October. And this was the month that we were meant to come unstuck. So I really, really feel to take it one game at a time, see what we go, see how we do, and stop fighting about what about winning. I don't understand why. I was in a space earlier because I was just curious to see what people are saying, and they're like, "Oh man, you need to apologize for being Arteta out," or "Oh, the Arteta ins are getting too giddy like last year." Like, who cares? I don't understand why you care. Like let people have their opinions. I don't really give a shit. Like I like watching football. That's my thing. I like watching football. I like my team doing well. So
yeah, I think we'll definitely do something in January. We'll probably have to get a little bit closer to maybe make a prediction for that. So don't worry. Like, we'll have tons of shows to talk about that. Don't worry. But I do think, The Athletic basically told everybody that, Arsenal are looking for a central midfielder. So yeah, I think people are just looking to complain. And right now, in terms of being the best team in the league, it's just factual. You're at the top of the league. We're playing the most entertaining football. And right now, Arsenal and Manchester City are very quite clearly the most productive teams in terms of really any kind of statistics that you'll look. And so I kind of wanted to end it also really quickly. I hear from a lot of people Mikel Arteta doesn't make subs. I mean, look, when you're winning and you're in a really good thing, guys, look, he made subs at excellent points in time. He got Eddie Nketiah on, Vieira Lukunga. So it's just, for me, it's about recognizing
It felt, it
some
felt,
of
it felt
these
like the Lukonga sub was a bit like a little bro moment. Like, okay, we'll just take Topayi off now. It felt like it just sort of was like, screw it. I'll just put Lukonga on. I don't really give a shit. But
it's beautiful to have the patience to basically make those decisions about when you can kind of sub people on when the game's won. Like, and you look like a genius when it's working, and you look like a genius when essentially those substitutions don't rely on you making game-winning decisions. So that's kind of the difference here. But again, he did those things. We got the points, and we're kind of now starting a month of October where we had one of our tougher games. Boom, it's off. And for me, you just got to look at the next game, and we take it from there. Because we've got a lot of games in this October. We've got a big stretch of points that we need to secure before the World Cup. For me, I've kind of been very insistent. I feel as though whatever we do this season is going to rely on the amount of points that we accumulate through the month of October. But basically any time from the start of the season till the World Cup, you need to make sure that you maximize the number of points that you receive there, because injuries and unknowns happen quite a bit later. So for me, I mean,
crucial.
I think he is being proactive, and that's anything that, everybody that had criticism for him about the subs, all we said is, I just want you to be proactive. And I think people are seeing it. So the big benefit that we saw is we've got this big win. Kind of want to tie it off now. So guys, we're going to be back with some more content. Don't worry. I think tomorrow we're going to be back with the Bodo preview. And then we've got the reviews coming up. So just make sure that you guys like, comment, subscribe. You hit the bell for notifications to know when, in fact, we do upload. In terms of the boys' socials, you can find me at GeorgeV_AFC. Curran, where can they find you?
Find me at Curran BoP, and I got it right this time. There we go. That's what you like to see.
Exactly. And then you can find Chris at CKFTBL. That's at CK Football. And again, sorry, he was unable to become part of the stream, but he's going to be back soon. Don't worry about it, guys. Thank you so much, guys, for everybody for sticking with us. You guys, make sure you guys comment about what we can improve and what you loved maybe about us beating the scum down there. No drunk driving issues for us today and on Saturday, but we move. So thank you so much, guys, and make sure that you guys catch us tomorrow for the Bodo preview. So thank you so much, and we'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.